Welcome to the Leading Ladies Podcast with international leadership coach, speaker, author, trainer, and your host, Fiona McKay. The Leading Ladies Podcast shares stories and advice from women around the world who have successfully navigated the glass ceiling. You'll gain powerful insights into strategies for cracking the glass ceiling, embracing your self-worth and value, and advocating for yourself and others. So please join Fiona for frank, courageous, and heartfelt conversations designed to take you on a journey to new levels of personal and professional success.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Leading Ladies of podcast. I am so excited for today's guest. We have Gina Radke joining us here today, and boy, is this woman amazing. Or should I say, girl, is this woman amazing, not boy. Gina Radke is an entrepreneur, economic influencer, and author. She is an owner and CEO of aerospace manufacturing company, Galley Support Innovations, and she uses her international business experience to serve as an international trade advisor to the US Congress. Gina has also received awards both locally and nationally in business and has been named one of 5 women to watch in international business, as well as being named as a 2019 Step Ahead honoree by the Manufacturing Institute in Washington, D.C. In addition to all of these amazing achievements, Gina's book, More Than, was released in late fall 2019 and sold out not once, but twice across retailers during pre-release sales. Gina now travels the country speaking on topics such as leadership, entrepreneurship, social activism, and making male allies. Gina, I am so excited that you're here with us today.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. I love the idea of this podcast. And of course, I have an affection for red heels, so I love the logo. Oh,
fantastic. Yeah, can't beat a pair of good heels.
That's right. I always say if I've got my red pumps on, that you know business is about to get done.
Yep, so. Absolutely. Well, Gina, is there anything that I didn't say about you in your introduction that you would like our audience to know about you?
Other than the fact that I am a wife of 22 years and the mother of 3, both adopted and biological children. So that adds a whole different dynamic to my background and, of course, a little bit about what my book is about. So that's it. I think you covered it pretty well.
Yeah, all-round badass is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
So, Gina, I always start with our first question.
Yes.
What do you think of the glass ceiling? Does it still exist?
Oh, it most definitely does still exist. I think that I really recognize that in manufacturing. Of course, I'm one of, we do have a growing number of women in manufacturing, but not quite as many in aerospace manufacturing. And so I see that glass ceiling because there are more women who are coming up, and people are saying, I hear, we don't have women, who qualify, or we don't have women who have applied for this position. And the truth is, we're such a small percentage in the manufacturing field that we have to get more to get in there to break through that glass ceiling. And I always tell everybody that you go with what you know. So if you look across any manufacturing, any aerospace, just about any company at all in the U.S. and across the world, and it's all dominated by older white men. And so you go with what you know. So older white men are seeing other, older white men and going, I trust him. He's a good friend. He's trustable. I can see myself in him. And so that's who they tend to surround themselves with, because that's who they feel comfortable with. And I am not in any means saying that that is all intentional. I think the issue is that they are not doing intentional diversity. And so they're not intentionally looking for people who are not like them. So then that's where that glass ceiling is. They think that it's disappeared because we've said it's disappeared, but it's not disappeared because they are not actually being very, very intentional about finding people who doesn't remind them of themselves, and who, doesn't look like what they see on a daily basis when they go to the golf club or when they go, play tennis or whatever it is that they do. So it's still there. And now it's almost like it's there, but it's veiled as not being there. Kind of like your background's like the sky is behind it. And so they think it's open and it's like, nope, that's still glass. We're still the birds that are running into the very clear glass because people are not being intentional and opening, that sealing up. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love about what you said about, people hiring what they know. Mm-hmm. I actually have an upcoming podcast called Like Hires Like, barriers to being employed in aerospace. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it is intentional, but I would say the vast majority of the time it's not. I think our brains are hardwired to automatically look to people like us. I mean, as a Brit living in North America, I hear a British accent, I'm like, whoa. Oh, who's that?
Yeah.
And so we really need to be conscious of what it is that we look for and what we don't look for, so that we're actually proactively looking for it. So love that you shared that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I had an example. I had a gentleman that was hiring a lot for my engineering department. And I told him, I said, I want you to go out and go to this HBCU, which is historically Black college and university, and talk to them about coming to work in our engineering department. And I told him, I want to cast a wide net and all this good stuff. And he came to me and he got a little offended. And he said, I feel like you're telling me who I have to hire. And I said, I am not telling you who you have to hire, but I want you to be intentional in who you reach out to. And I brought it to his attention. He was about 32 at the time. And I said, tell me who you've hired that is not a young white male. And he said, well, that's all I know. And I said, exactly. I said, I am not calling you a racist, but I'm saying that's all you know. So that's what you're comfortable with. That's who the people that you talk to, the people that you go and have drinks with. And they're engineers because you went to engineering school and you say, hey, we're hiring. So what I'm telling you is I want you to be intentional about knowing other people and be intentional about getting the word out that we're hiring. And so he came back to me actually a couple of days later and he said, I thought about it. And he said, I never, ever thought of myself as, not wanting to hire women or not wanting to hire people of color. But I realized that I was accidentally doing that. And so thank you for making me aware of that. And I said, that's it. That's what, the biggest thing in life is to become aware of other situations. And it was a great conversation. We had a great eye opener for him. Shortly after, we brought in our first female engineer and our first person of color as an engineer. So, or I should say our first person of color from the U.S. We do have some foreign nationals that work for us, but this was our first person of color who was born in the U.S. that came to work for our engineering department in 15 years. And not because we weren't open to them, but because they weren't applying. And so I said, well, that's us. Let's go out and make sure that they know that these jobs are out there. And so we specifically started advertising our jobs with HBCUs and with minority-based job searches. So,
Gina, I just want to dive through the screen and hug you right now. I know I only ever talk to you on the phone or through Zoom, but man, I just love you. Or woman, I just love you. I'm going to say man.
I do it all. That's okay. It's like man and dude are they're universal.
Yeah.
I say to my husband sometimes, I'll say girl, and he goes, I am not a girl. Stop talking to me like I'm your girlfriend. I'm like, it's a habit. I'm sorry.
I just love your candidness and your boldness. I mean, like to go and have those conversations. I have been scratching my head because I keep having these conversations with men and they're like, we want to hire the best person for the job. And I'm like, okay, how do I have this discussion with them? Because who you think might be the right person for this job is not who I might think the right person for this job. I mean, I might even be biased. I might be, looking for women over men. And I think I just love the way you explained it. You're just being intentional. And again, it's about, what makes the best, decision for your team and your outlook. And for me, that's diverse thought.
Yeah.
And, there's many ways we can get that. And so I just want to give you a huge hug for having those conversations. Like, wow.
And I think, obviously in my position, it's a little different because I am the owner. So, I sign their paycheck. And one time I told a guy, I said, it was funny. He was a new guy and he was actually explaining to me how expensive the machine was he was working on. And I was like, I know, because I signed the check for it. And I joked about, do you know that it's my name that's on your checks? And he's like, well, I get direct deposit. I was like, okay, but it's not what I meant. So I carry a little more weight, so it's a little bit easier. And I'm aware of that for me as the owner to say these things. But also talking to people in areas that I'm not the owner, I'm just a board member or, a volunteer or, appointed somewhere, talking to them and just making them aware and saying, the first thing is to take down their defenses and say, listen, I'm not calling you out and saying that you're bad. I'm just saying, I want you to be aware of this. I have unconscious bias myself. Everyone does. And so once we become aware of that, though, we can check it and go, okay, this is an unconscious bias and I need to remove that and move forward. And so that's just it's really important to realize. To say that you do not have unconscious bias is just, you're lying to yourself.
Yeah,
and so,
absolutely.
Once we can realize that, then we go, oh, okay. And it's people used to talk about it with people with tattoos all the time, they're tatted up and so they look scary or they're this or they're that. Yeah. And so,
I have a tattoo.
and then you go, okay, wait, I think that for whatever reason, but let me actually meet this person, And so, it's all over the board. I talk about it in my book about how if a woman and a man have the exact same resume, you're more likely to look at the man and go, okay, this is good. Because unconsciously what we think about women is, what if they get pregnant? What if they have to leave? What if they have, a bad attitude? And even unconsciously we think, oh, we can't have two women in the same department because they'll gossip or they'll be bitter or they'll be bitchy with each other. And so these are things that are in our psyche that we have to go, okay, sometimes stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, but we need to say, we realize that's an unconscious bias and move past that.
Yeah. And the systems and structures and the media, it's trained us that way.
Oh yeah.
And with all of the, all of the discussion and the debate and the demonstrations happening right now, I just think it's so important for us to recognize that we'll all slip up, we'll all make mistakes. You're not a bad person. You don't need to beat yourself up. I mean, for me, one of the new things that I'm really conscious of is being a performative ally. Yeah. And I'm going around and I'm like, is this okay? Is that okay? But I've got friends that are people of color, and they're willing to say to me, it's okay to make a mistake and don't beat yourself up. And I think if we could all talk more openly, the world would be more awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's the truth with people of color and with women, and especially with women of color. We see now that they'll say silence is betrayal and silence is violence. And what we're saying is we're not saying speak everything perfectly. We're saying say something and then say, was that offensive? Did I accidentally cross the line? Make me aware. And so that's all women are asking for. And that's why when I talk about making male allies, is making men aware. Because I always say 99.9% of men are not, sexist pigs. Now, my husband says he says, you're being generous. It's probably about 65% or not. But they're just not aware. Yeah. And it's the same thing with different races, different nationalities. We are just unaware. And so we need to make ourselves more aware. And once you are aware, then you have the choice to be an ally or not. And it's the same with, male allies, with white allies. With allies, period.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a male coaching client, and he commented to me recently. He was like, there's so much that I now see that I didn't see before. He was like, somebody came into the facility today and said, where's the girls? And he turned around and was like, do you mean this person and this person? And I'm just like, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And I know we're here to talk about more than, what it means to be more than.
Yeah.
So
I have a copy of it right here.
Oh, ta-da! Beautiful, beautiful. So Gina, what does it mean to you to be more than?
Well, so the original title actually of the book was More Than a Business Bitch. And that came, Well, and I'm going to tell you where it came from is because I got an email one time from a male customer. We were doing contract negotiations, and he meant to, I'm assuming he meant to forward it to his boss, but instead he replied to me. And he replied all, and he said, she's being a real bitch about the marketing section, but the contract's almost all finished. And I remember when I got that, and I tell the story in the book, I literally I sat back in my chair, in the office that I built, my safe space, and was like, are you kidding me? Two things. One, how dare you? Just because I won't give you what you want, I'm a bitch.
Yeah.
And two, what does that say about his work culture that was okay to make that statement to his boss?
Yeah.
And so eventually, I took a moment and I took a couple deep breaths, and then I saw all of a sudden he was recalling the message. And I'm like, oh, too late there, buddy. And so about 2 hours later, I got a message that said, hey, everything's good in the contract. I've sent it over for you to sign. And I was like, yeah, I bet you did, and that person actually is no longer with that company. And I don't know if it had anything to do with the email or not. But that was the original title. And so I did take business bitch off because I do know that word is it's a trigger word.
Yeah.
Some women, they use it as a term of endearment. Some do not. And so, but the overall meaning of more than is we're more than business women. We're more than coworkers. We're more than wives. We're more than mothers. We're more than friends. We are so many things, and we're really just more than. And so I've heard women say, oh, you're a lot, or men say you're a lot, and yeah, I am a lot. I'm a lot of things, and I'm okay with that. And so being more than is kind of embracing everything that we are and moving forward with it and saying, I'm proud of this, and in the subtitle, of course, is how to be bold and balanced in life and business. And that's a question. I'm in business with my husband, and I talk about that in the book as well, and how it's actually, I think, it is viewed as a negative when I work with a lot of men, because then they can dismiss me and go, oh, she's not really the owner. They say, oh, I'll get the question, are you the owner for tax purposes? And I'm like, you get no tax benefits for being a woman. My husband's a Native American veteran. If we were going to do anything for government contracts or anything, we would, put him on there. So, and so that's sort of an infuriating thing that I have to deal with. But the other thing, and the reason for the subtitle and the basis of the book, is no one ever asked my husband, so how do you balance life and work? They never say, how do you balance being a father and running a business? They don't ask him those questions. They ask me these questions. And so, and before I would always be asked to speak about balancing work and life. Like, how do you find that balance, or how do you find that harmony? Whatever you want to call it. Some people don't like to call it work-life balance anymore. Some people like to call it work-life harmony. Whatever you want to call it, they were asking me that question, and they were not asking my husband that question. And so I thought it was really important to write the book and to say, this is how I'm doing it, and here are some practical tips. I even give tips on like dealing with sexual harassment and sexual advances, and different tips for different personalities. I'm a very bold personality. I crack myself up. I think I'm funny. So I'll use humor sometimes to deflect it or to point out, hey, this is what you just did to me. And some people are not like that at all. And so in that particular chapter, I said, if you have more, here are some options based on different types of personalities that you can use to deal with this. And so that, the book, I had so many women come to me and say, will you be my mentor? And I didn't have a female mentor coming up in manufacturing. And as a matter of fact, I remember one time I called a guy and I said, listen, you've done well in manufacturing and aerospace manufacturing at that. I'd really like to ask if you would be my mentor. And he said, yes, I'd love to have dinner with you. And I was like, okay, well, my husband and I will meet you and your wife there. And I was like, that's not what I meant. And if, once that statement was made, he never contacted, that was it. He never contacted me again about being his mentor or working with him to be my mentor. And so the book, I wanted it to be a mentor for women. Yeah. And because just numerically, we are so outnumbered. Women are 52% of the workforce, 14% of management positions, and only 4% of CEO positions. Yeah. So there are just simply not enough women in management or CEO positions to mentor all the other women. So I really wanted my book to be, sort of that mentor that you could have in your bag and read on the plane, or that you could listen to on Audible, and be that for people. Yeah. One of the best compliments I ever got, and I kept begging her, I was like, if you'd please write that in a review, that would be amazing, was she told me, she said, when I read your book, I felt like I was having an hour-long lunch with someone who was 10 years ahead of me in their career. Yeah. And she said, that was so good for me. She said, I didn't feel like you were trying to be like, I know everything and speak over my head. She said, you just laid it out and you're like, this is what I've dealt with. This is what a lot of women deal with. I use a lot of stories in the book from other women. And so I just wanted it to be that, hey, you're not the only one out there. And here's some tips. And as a matter of fact, one email I got, and she allowed me to share this on my social media sites. It broke my heart, but it made me happy. She said when she was actually reading the intro that she began to tear up. And she said she found herself just crying. And she said, I realized what it was is that I didn't feel alone. She said, and I feel alone so often in my career field that it was such a relief to not feel alone that it literally brought me to tears.
That's beautiful.
And, I shared that and I had men comment on that and say, I felt the same way. And so it's been neat that it's been a universal thing and men have read it and had, good feedback on it. So it's been an interesting experience. I'll be honest. When I wrote it, I did not expect it to sell out in pre-sale. I thought I was going to be stuck with thousands of books sitting in my garage. And when Amazon Target, they called and said, hey, we've already sold out.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, so we did another run. We did another printing and it was pretty amazing. It actually sold out twice during pre-sale.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was just word of mouth. I still to this day have not done any advertising on it. I think women just needed it.
Yeah, I totally need it. Totally. And I love the concept around, mentor in a book, mentor in a bag, especially with the distinction that, there's just not enough women in senior positions that to mentor everybody. I mean, for me, I have people approach me on LinkedIn and I want to help, but I'm a business owner. It's like, how do I make time? And I guess that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast, because I'm like, I know so many amazing women and I've had so many formal and informal mentors, men and women, that have really helped me get where I am. It's like, how can we put this on loudspeaker around the world?
Yes.
Needed.
It is.
Yeah. So I know that your book doesn't necessarily focus on this, but I'm really, really curious about your statement on, more than, because I feel like women that are louder, more opinionated, strong, I've been told, oh, you're too intense, Fiona. All these labels that we get given. How do you keep filling your cup despite getting those things sent your way?
Yeah. Actually, things like this, listening to podcasts of other women, reading blogs, reading books. I mean, I'm a constant learner. And it's so amazing. Like I was saying about feeling alone, because I get that all the time. I actually just did a video. We won an award. It was wonderful. It was the Social Impact Award, and for the women-owned business category. And I made the comment that I've been called a bulldog, the toughest thing in a skirt, and of course a bitch. And it was funny when I made the comment about a bitch, they bleeped it out, and it sounds so much worse when they censor it than if I just say the word. But I'm always reaching out and trying to learn from other people and trying to hear from other women who are, the toughest thing in a skirt and who go, yeah, I get called a bitch. They don't say it to me out loud, but they say it underneath their breath or, whatever.
Or they make the jokes like, here comes Fiona. She's scary. What's she going to hold me accountable for now? And I'm like, I'm just doing my job, mate.
Yes. And I love that. Yeah. You said, what is she's going to hold me accountable for? Well, hello, that's my job, to hold you accountable. And I love, but because you're a woman, that's bad. I have a friend who is an attorney at a major company their general counsel, as a matter of fact. And she said they started calling her Hatchet Lady and said she was coming for all the white men's jobs. And she said, no, I'm only coming for the men that aren't doing their jobs. Yeah. And so it's this, this idea that because we're coming and we are more than, I am not quiet. I tell everybody I'm not a bulldog. I'm more like a chihuahua. Like I'm just, yappy and I won't go away. Yes. Yeah. I'm like, I'm just not going to go away. I am very consistent. And so because we are doing that, we get these labels and it's like, listen, I am more than what you see from, 8 to 10 hours a day or however long I'm at work. I'm multidimensional. I'm a mother. I'm a carer. I'm, a lover. I'm all these things. And yes, I'm a person who gets business done. Yeah. And no one ever looks at a man and says, oh gosh, he's a giant asshole, because he's making us do our job. They say, man, he's gruff, but boy, he's good at his job. And so, I think that that's important that we remember that there's nothing wrong with being more than. We want to be more than.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I tell people all the time is, I heard this statement actually, so it's not original to me, but someone said, you know what, just if you act like you were a white man, what would you do?
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I think I would get away with everything. I mean, I would do so much more because it feels like, and it may just feel like this, I don't know, but like they're doing all sorts of stuff. I mean, we look at people who run for politics and they have multiple affairs and they have multiple, bankruptcies and tax evasion, and they're still like, I'm the best candidate for the job. Yeah. Whereas women we're like, no, we have to be perfect. We can't take chances that may hurt us. Yeah. And so I'm looking at these men in office going, well, if they can do that, why can't I?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And have that freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And also, giving each other permission and the freedom.
Yes.
And just so it's clear to our listeners, we're not saying that, all white men are this way and all.
Absolutely
that's not our intention.
No.
This stuff is real. This is real.
It is, yes.
And these conversations are happening to us all the time.
Yes.
And one of the things that I found, and more so in the US than in England, but we just don't talk about it. And if we don't talk about it and we shove it under the rug, it's going to continue. And I was speaking to a dear friend of mine who's the owner of Gender Intelligence Group. And, it's kind of like most women, when they leave a company, it's not because they had some big, incident of sexual harassment or some real mistreatment. It's constant. It's the day in, day out, the comments, the assumptions, and it just wears away.
Yes. And the microaggressions. I talk about that in my book. The constant microaggressions just chip at your soul. Mm-hmm. Yes. And you're right. We are not saying all white men are bad. As a matter of fact, if it hadn't been for white men, we would not be where we are in society. Absolutely. Because it was the white male allies that came and stepped up and gave us a place and said, let me open this door for you. Mm-hmm. Even, if you know the Rosa Parks story, when she was on the bus and she was arrested, her husband did not want her to pursue it. And it was actually a white Jewish man that came in and said, I will represent you for free if you will go and move forward with this. This has to be changed. And so it's the white male allies, and black male allies, men of color, period, and men, period, those allies who are helping us move forward. Mm-hmm. And so I always tell everybody, I said, listen, I don't hate white men. I love white men. My daddy was a white man. Yeah. I always said, I didn't love you, enough to marry one of you, but, I have nothing against white men. And I hate that it sounds like I'm picking on you guys, but when you look at it, you are, just Google the, executive leaderships of any company. It's predominantly white men. Yeah. And so,
and I want you to call it out. I think to my husband, I'm like, my opinions and my feelings are not reserved for the men I work with. I'm telling my husband all the time, use your voice. I want you to stand up for the women in your office, with what you see.
Yes. And and I think that's the difference in an ally and a friend. An ally moves forward. And I think in my book, I call it an ally and a supporter. A supporter is like, yes, you go, girl, you can do anything. An ally says, have we noticed, guys, that there's no women in this room? Have we noticed that there's only men in this room? Yeah. There's a story I tell about a guy in my book that he is a quality manager actually at a major aerospace manufacturer. Mm-hmm. And he talks about, he was in a board meeting. It was a volunteer thing. He was in a board meeting and he was the chair of whatever board this was. And there was a woman who was supposed to speak. They put her last on the agenda. And then the director got up and left before she spoke. And that gave the okay for other people to leave before she spoke, before the meeting was over. And he called him out. And he sent an email to everyone and said, I noticed that you have never gotten up and left before I speak.
Yeah.
And he didn't say you did that because she's a woman. He just said, I feel like she gave her time and you did not respect her time. And so I wrote about it in the book. He actually read the book later. He said he turned around and bought 5 copies for his daughters, his wife, and actually for his HR department. And he said, it made me feel good that you said, oh, I did this great thing and I was an ally, but also reading it, I realized there's so much more I need to be doing. And so that is just, my husband is a wonderful ally.
Mm-hmm.
And before he became aware, he was sort of like, oh, is it always, do they always talk about how you're a woman? Is that really true? And then one time I said, I just want you to watch how many comments are made about my gender. That's all. And see if the things they do to me, would they do it to you? So we were at a major aerospace trade show. And by the end of the day, he said, I am exhausted. He said, oh my gosh, there are microaggressions everywhere. He said, I cannot believe how many times people asked if you were in marketing, how many times they asked, who did you work for? How many times they would speak to me and not to you? How many times they assumed you were my assistant? One guy, I tell this story in the book as well, reached over and I had my name badge, my lanyard, and it hangs literally right on my chest area, my breast. And he just reached over and grabbed it and looked at it. And and my son happened to be behind me at this point, and my son was so upset after and I kind of put the guy in his place and he walked off. And my son was like, how dare he do that? He would never do that to a man. How dare he do that to you? And I said, happens all the time. You would not believe the things that I have to deal with. And my husband was just like, oh.
It's amazing. I mean, when I first moved here, I was the customer business director to Boeing for Rolls-Royce. And I would go to these conferences and I would sit down at the table and the men wouldn't acknowledge me. And then somebody would catch sight of my business card and all of a sudden they would be like, oh, hello.
Oh, yeah.
And the comments, you're very young to be a director. And and you know what? Best person for the job. Throw it back at him.
Yep.
It's like we have to work 10 times as hard to get the same level of respect. And it's not with every guy. But
and you're right, it's not. There's again, back to the book, I tell the story of a senator named Joe Jett. And that was his real name, and he was in aerospace too, is what's funny. But he made the comment to me one time. It was funny because he said, now, no offense. And usually when someone says that, you're like, okay, be prepared to take offense. He said, no offense, but I have found that women in aerospace have to work twice as hard to get half the respect as men do. And I was just like, can I quote you on that? Thank you so much. And like you said, it is not with all men. And I don't believe it's intentional. I really don't.
Well,
and
I think it's occasionally intentional, but
occasionally, yes, occasionally intentional. But for the most part, it's not. And I believe that the more and more that men become aware, and I am seeing more men at the events I'm speaking at. I've spoken at many events for, there's one called, women, I think it's called Women in Nuclear Power that I spoke at. And there's one called WIP, it's Women in Power, and it's for, utility companies. And I was so excited to see men there. And I told them, I said, guys, we don't need you to stand up on this podium and be like, women's rights. What we need you to do is when you're in the office and they're looking at that resume and, Gina Radke's resume comes across, to not go, well, I wonder how old she is. Is she going to have to take off because her kid's sick? Is she going to get pregnant? Is she going to have an attitude? We need you to just look at that for our experience. And when you get to that final section, go, guys, let's just look. Do we have any people of color? Do we have any women? That's what we need. We need you to be our allies behind closed doors.
And and when they are hiring, they need to ask themselves, is this a diversity-wise decision? Because again, like hires like, and we just need to be conscious that that's just something that humans do, and let's call ourselves out on it.
I once, as far as like, I always say like goes with like. I once, when I think I was 24 years old, and I had just gone to work for this company as prior to owning my own company. And they had this diversity training. Now, we didn't know. They did sort of a social experiment on us. They had us all go out, and then a group of us came in. And when you came in, the tables were separated, and it was black men at one table, white men at another table, white women at one table, black women at another table. And there was only one chair at each table. So you go in and you find your seat. And naturally, the white men went to the white men, the black men went to the black men. And I went to sit at a table full of black women. And they said, the woman, she talked about it. And then she said, everyone did this except for you. She said, will you stand up and tell us why? Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm 24 years old and I'm like, I have no idea. And so, and it's the worst thing in the world is to be called out like you've done some amazing, very aware thing and you have no clue as to why you did it. I thought about that for years. And I thought, why did I do that when everyone else did, like went to what they were like? And I realized I was the only white girl on my block. I had 4 houses on my block. Each one of them was all girls. We were all around the same age, and I was the only white girl. So I'm very, very comfortable around women of color. So that was natural to me. And it was the funniest thing. And that's when I really realized how you really do go to what you grew up with and to what is natural to you. And so, but of course, I didn't realize it till like 7 years later. And I remember one day, all of a sudden, I was like, oh, that's why that happened, and that made me become more aware of my own unconscious bias and all the bias that other people have.
So Gina, I know we've talked quite a bit today about men and how we feel about them. Could you give us some examples of male allies and how they've contributed to your success?
Absolutely. One, of course, my husband is he's very quick to say, no, my wife runs this company, or my wife does this. But also I've had male allies who have said, I think, it's been all men who have put me on executive boards. It's been all men who have put me on international trade boards. And so they have come along and said, whether it's intentional and they're like, hey, you need a woman and she's a great woman, or not, it has been all men who have put me in those positions and who have vouched for me. And what's wonderful is they know that they can put me on there as the token, but I will not be a silent token. And they know that, and they continue to do it. And I think that's probably what's so wonderful, is knowing that I'm not going to be a silent token. And they continue to do that. And I actually had someone come to me one time and say, I want you to be on this board. And he gave me a whole presentation. And at the end, he showed me the board of directors. And he said, do you see something in common here? And it was, he said, it's all white men over 40 with goatees. And that was kind of thing. And I said, you know what? I love intentional diversity. Thank you for thinking of me when you're being intentional. Now, of course, I don't want a job just because I'm a woman, but I do want you to look at something and go, this isn't right. We all look the same. We need something different. And to reach out to people that and ask, to women and to people of color, and ask them to join in your organization or whatever you're doing. So I 100% say within my own company and even outside of my own company, that it has been the white male allies who have put me in the positions that I'm in. And not one time, I'm trying to think, but I do not believe, no, there is one female senator who put me on an executive for a state level board. Of course, that had to be okayed by our governor, who's a white man. But other than that, it has all been men who have put me on those boards and who have vouched for me and who have pushed my name to the front and said, this is an option. And there have been things I've applied for that they said, hey, we think you're great. And other white men have gotten the position. And I'm like, that's okay. At least you were intentional. They may have been more qualified for me for that position, but at least you were intentional in including me. And so I 100% give credit to the men who did that. I'm overly grateful for them. And then I go forward and I thank them and I tell others about them. And there's a guy, Barry Sellers. I talk about him in the book too. He actually coined the phrase for me, pale, male, and stale. And he came to me and he said, Gina, he said, we got to do something. This board is pretty pale, male, and stale. And I looked at him, and he said, old white men. We're nothing but old white men. And I was like, I love that. So, and he was aware. And he came to me and he said, and who do you know? What other women do you know? What other people do you know of color too? And I'm not a person of color, but
if you were a young woman, if you met a young woman who was starting out in their career, what would you tell her in terms of, how to find those male allies? Like, what advice would you give?
Well, probably the first thing is I'd be like, buy my book, read my book. No, but see, that's good. I'm always getting in trouble because they say I don't push the book enough. And I'm like, oh, let me do that.
Buy Gina's book. It's amazing.
Yes, please. It's on Audible. But what I would tell her is find the people who you feel comfortable with and you think that maybe they'll make a good ally, and then go to them and make them aware and say, hey, can you do me a favor? You can flat out ask some of them, if you have the relationship, once you've built that relationship, to flat out say, I need you to be my ally in this situation. When I speak in the boardroom and someone repeats me, Can you make note of that to the other men? Can you say, yes, Gina just spoke on that, or that's exactly what Gina said. And then also ask them questions like, I need another set of eyes and another set of ears for this. And this is what has been absolutely the best thing is I'll say, I need another set of eyes and another set of ears of this. When we go, will you notice, tell me if it's just me. Are they looking at you when they speak? Or are they talking to me as well? Are they giving me the same amount of attention and respect when I speak as they're giving to you? And you would be amazed once they see that. I mean, that's what made my husband so exhausted that one day. Once he saw it, he was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know, I had no idea. And so just making those allies aware and then flat out asking them, saying, hey, will you be an ally for me? And I can promise you very few men, even the ones who don't really want to be an ally, will say, no, I don't want to be an ally. You know, they'll go, sure. What do you need? Or what does that mean? And you go, and that's when you get to have that conversation and say, I just need you to be an extra set of eyes for me. I just need you to be an extra set of ears for me. And then there is yet to be one person I have asked that question of that they have not come back and gone, oh my gosh, I did not realize that. You know, I got a call the other day, and I talk about this term in my book about writing bitch. I have never heard that term until recently. And I wrote about it in my book, and he goes, I did not realize how many times men said, I'll ride bitch, which means I'll ride in the passenger seat of the car. And so they were just like, he goes, I've heard that so many times since you said that to me. So I must have been hearing it this whole time and just never been aware of it. Yeah. And so just those little things they'll recognize and they'll go, oh, you know, that's not okay. And even if it's just them and themselves recognizing that bias that they have and going, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to think that.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's asking them to be aware, asking them to be your ally. I have made so many great male allies. I would 100% say I have more male allies now than I have male aggressors or people who, you know, are coming after me or don't want me here because I'm a woman. Because, like I said, I don't believe that's what the men want. Yeah. There's just those little unconscious bias things that they're unaware of.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love what you say there about, you know, ask for what you want and ask them to be aware. It's two simple things. I need this from you and I just want you to be aware of it. You know, I really love the graceful but bold and powerful way you're approaching these situations.
Yeah.
So let's switch now to female allies. So talk to me about some of the female allies and some of the female mentors and the female sponsors in Ukraine. They're harder to find in aerospace because there's not as many of them.
Yes, they are harder to find.
Tell me about some of the great women that you've been fortunate enough to know.
Well, I have a wonderful tribe. I have several different text messages with different groups, but I have a tribe in particular. And what happened was I joined a leadership class, and it was with my state leadership program. And there were two women in there that we just connected. And we just became sort of our tribe. We would, you know, the group chat, you know, they always say for the woman who, you know, makes the big decision, there's the group chat behind her going, you can do this. You're awesome. You're a rock star. And that is exactly what this group chat is. Yeah. And before that, I had such a hard time, especially being in aerospace, especially being in manufacturing, finding male or female allies. Yeah. And so when I was very intentional about that, I joined these leadership programs. I found some female allies in that. And what's beautiful is there's this group, and one of them is all come from completely different backgrounds. One of them is like I said, general counsel for a major electric company. One of them is a nutritionalist specialist, plant-based doctor. I mean, she's sort of the everything of health and nutrition. Yeah. One of them she's the one I call the behind the scenes, go get it done. I remember one time, and you're gonna have to pardon my language, but one time I was telling her about things I want to do, and she looked at me and she said, listen, we got to get shit done. It's time. And so I call her the pusher. She's behind the scenes going, you need to get out there and you need to do this. And you need to get out there and you need to do this. So she's like the motivator of our group. And actually I had someone make her a little sign that said, "Get shit done."
Yeah, everybody needs a friend that's a get shit done friend.
Yes.
I'm very proud to say I'm a get shit done friend.
Yes.
Or and JFDI, as we say in the UK.
Oh, I love it. JFDI.
Spell it out.
I think I know what that means. I love it. Yes. And so, so I have that group, and I met them through these leadership programs, and it's just a wonderful group. And so, and one of the things I do is I always make myself open to meet female friends and to add to my tribe. Now, I will tell you, I'm very particular. I tell everybody, I said, listen, my life is an open party, but only certain people get invited to the dinner table. Yeah. There are things that I absolutely will not tolerate in my life. I don't tolerate gossip. I don't tolerate negativity. You're not going to talk bad about somebody. And I am really quick to adjust. You know, they tell you in business, you need to be slow to hire and quick to fire. Yeah. And so, for instance, I went and had dinner with some friends, and this one woman, she walks up to join us, and immediately she said, "I don't hang out with so-and-so anymore because they slept with so-and-so and they started doing da-da-da." And I was like, not my people. Yeah. She may be wonderful at her job. She may be great, but if you're going to put down other women, you're not my person. And not that I don't like her, not that I hate her, not that I'm like, oh, you're awful. We're friends on Facebook. We chat every once in a while. We're very cordial, but that type of person does not get invited to the dinner table of my life. They might get invited to the networking event, but not the dinner table. And so I think that it's okay to be very particular about who you invite in, because let's face it, we don't invite people to our dinner table to have dinner at our house that we don't really know. You know, that's we go have dinner out with them. But the ones that are at the dinner table, and I call them the after party group, when everyone has left the party and they're helping you clean up, those are that tight circle of friends. Those people are so important to have in your life. So I always make myself open to have friends and to add to that circle, but I'm very, very quick to cut out the negativity and the negative people. And maybe those people can come back in my life later and become closer later. But when they have decided for themselves that, you know, being a gossip or being a mean girl is not a good characteristic to have, then they can come back in my life. So I'm very, very protective of my inner circle, but I'm also very open to add to that inner circle, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think it is that sometimes has women not supporting other women? I think that there are multiple things. I actually have a chapter about the mean girls in my book. And I think that there are multiple things. I think one, sometimes I think women get so used to being the only woman in the room that they don't want that competition. They're like, no, this is my spot and I don't want the competition. Or they think that this is a problem that we have, is we think that we have to represent the entire gender, the entire feminine gender. And so we take all of that on our shoulders and we think, if I bring another woman in here, what if she's a gossip? What if she's catty? What if she's bitchy? You know, what if she's all these things and then she's going to make me look bad? Yeah. And here's the truth is, we don't think that about men. Men don't think, oh, if I bring another man in here, what if he's, you know, a sexual harasser, or what if he's an asshole? You know, they don't think that. And so we shouldn't have to think that either. I think I was having a great conversation with somebody about, you know, women supporting other women. And I think a lot of it is down to, you know, the ego and letting go of the ego and, you know, recognizing that there are things out there that try and pit women against women. And it's like, you know, don't buy into that. Yeah. You know, there's room for all of us, and, you know, put the ego down and welcome other women in. And if they get off track, you know, talk to them, guide them back in. That's exactly right. But if we really want to change it, we proactively have to make sure that we are not the only ones there. And we have to be willing to stand up to the men and say, you know what, there might be 10 of you thinking this, but I disagree. You know? That's right. And we cannot talk about other women in front of men. You know, there's the saying that queens fix other queens' crowns in private. Yeah. And we cannot add to the stereotype by saying, gosh, that woman, she's a bitch. Yeah. Or I hate it when women like her come in because it makes the rest of us look bad. Do not do that. Yeah. If they are not doing their job, you speak specifically to what they are not doing correctly. You do not downplay their entire gender, because that is not making it any easier for you. We think that it makes us one of the guys for that moment, but it doesn't. It hurts the entire fight for all of women's equality.
Yeah. And if you're listening as a female listener right now and thinking, oh my God, I've done that, don't worry. I've done it. Gina's done it. We've all done it at some point. The key thing again is that intentional awareness.
Yep.
You know, high school often makes us that way.
Yes.
And it's like, let's just notice it and call ourselves out on it. We don't need to beat ourselves up. We just need to acknowledge that thinking and that behavior exists and actively work to change it.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah. So Gina, I could sit here and talk to you all day long. You know, this interview could go on for 6 hours, or if not 6 days. But I really want to be respectful because you are a very busy CEO and general all-round badass. So my question for you, and kind of seems a bit silly now considering all of the advice you've been given, but I always like to end the show with a question. You know, what would you tell your niece, daughter, or a young woman entering a male-dominated industry? You know, what would be the one piece of advice? If you could only give her one, but what one piece of advice would you give her about smashing that ceiling, the glass ceiling?
It's okay to cry. Ooh. And I know that is a shocking one. It is okay. Go to the bathroom, have your tears, and get back out there. Yeah. It is okay. We see men throw fits and, you know, cuss and act a fool. And then no one goes, oh my gosh, you know, that was crazy. But women, if they cry, they're like, oh, she's being emotional again. No, it's okay. You excuse yourself. You go to the restroom. You check your feelings. Why are you having those emotions? And then you get back out there. Yeah. Because it just happens.
I love that. You got to give yourself permission to cry.
That's right.
It means you
have grace with yourself. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody once said to me, in order to feel, you know, true joy, you have to be able to experience sadness and anger. And so it's so important to let those feelings out to make space for the good you want to be in the world. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's something that I hear so many women say, oh my goodness, I cried and I'm mortified. Yeah. And I think, you know, sometimes I've stood on stages in front of groups of women and I've thought, if only they knew how many times I've sat in the bathroom bawling my eyes out in the stall. You know, just because we look strong doesn't mean that we're always that way. It doesn't mean that we don't have things happening in our lives.
That's right. And we need to make that okay. We need to say that's okay. I always tell everybody, I said, now if someone is crying next to you, please do not reach over and start hugging them. Don't bring more attention to it, but let them have that moment. Yeah. Get up, excuse yourself. Yeah, I talk about it in the book and I say, listen, what you need to do is you need to say, I'm having some issues going on over here or whatever. I'm not in the space to deal with this right now. By close of business today, I'd like to come back and discuss it. And you give them a time. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm upset and I'm leaving. No, you give them a time. You come back and you do your job. But don't batter and beat yourself up for having emotions. We are made that way. Men are made that way. I always get the question, you know, what do you think about women being emotional? And I made the statement, I said, you know, anger is an emotion, right? And it was so funny. There were 4 men standing up against the wall. And when I said that, they all went, oh my God, you know, like, I mean, and the women in the group, they never realized anger is an emotion. We see men get angry, but we don't call them emotional. But anger is an emotion. Yeah. So it is okay.
Just part of your humanity.
Yeah, it's part of you.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Well, listeners, I am sure that you are sitting here thinking, my God, I want to hear more from this woman. She is amazing. I just want to jump to the screen right now and hug her. I really encourage you, buy her book. You know, she has not asked me to plug it, but I'm just like, hey, if it's anything like what we've heard today, you know, got to get out and buy it. It is amazing. You know, buy Gina's book. If you go to the website, McKayUnlimited.com, or McKay Unlimited, I guess, if I spell it phonetically. Anyway, if you go to the website, you'll see the show notes, and there's information there on Gina and some of the things she's referenced today and her book, how you can buy it. Please go take a look and find out more about this amazing woman. You will not regret it. So once again, thank you for listening. Please jump online. We've got plenty of shows for you to listen to, and, you know, give us your feedback. Tell us which women that you want to hear from, and we will keep going talking about this glass ceiling until it is well and truly broken.
Thank you for listening, everyone. We hope you now have additional tools and insights for creating your own cracks in the glass ceiling. If you think this will inspire and help others, please Share this episode on your social media and leave your comments on McKayUnlimited.com/podcast. For more tips and support as you embrace your journey through the glass ceiling, please join our community Facebook group at leadingladiesofFB.com.